"You're not my father anymore, just a servant." Her words cut deeper than any blade I've known. The voice I once heard laughing in the halls, calling me Dad with warmth and affection, now spat venom at my very existence. I felt the sting, not of age, not of physical weakness, but of betrayal deep, personal, and unexpected. She stood there, chest rising with fury, arms flailing as if trying to push away decades of parental care and sacrifice. Eyes blazing with a fury I had never seen before, I remained seated at the kitchen table, my hands wrapped around the warm mug of coffee, pretending calm while my mind raced. 75 years of life had taught me many lessons: patience, restraint, and the quiet power of timing. I knew that no matter how hot the anger, no matter how loud the insults, a lesson delivered at the wrong moment is wasted. She needed to feel, not hear. She needed consequences, not arguments. The night before had been long, filled with tension that lingered like smoke. Her mother's absence, the quiet neglect that had built over years, and my own attempts to guide her without confrontation had all failed. She had grown used to taking, assuming, demanding, and now she believed that even me, her father, could be reduced to a servant in her eyes. Her arrogance was breathtaking, her entitlement palpable, and for a moment, I let the shock settle into my chest. But the morning brought clarity. I stood, poured my coffee into a thermos, and walked quietly through the house. Every room, every photograph, every object carried the story of a lifetime, decades of care, effort, and sacrifice. And none of it could be destroyed by words alone. I had prepared for moments like this, in ways she could never anticipate. The house, the keys, the small accounts she thought she could claim, they were all already secured. Quietly, methodically, without fanfare or threat. By the time the sun rose fully, spilling warm light across the lawn, I was ready. I walked to the gate and inspected it carefully, knowing that what comes next would be the first real lesson of her life, that authority, power, and respect cannot be demanded, they are earned, maintained, and understood. She arrived not long after, a fury of movement and words, storming up the driveway as if she owned the ground itself. I did not move to intercept her. I did not raise my voice. I watched from the porch, calm, quiet, my presence steady. For the first time, she sensed without words that the game had changed. I was not the man to be mocked or commanded. I was the man who had quietly prepared, patiently waited, and would now deliver a lesson she would never forget. She reached the gate and banged her fists, shouting that I had no right, that I was nothing, that she was done with me. The neighbors might have thought her temper justified, but I knew better. Anger, unchecked, is fragile. Power assumed, without preparation, is temporary. And entitlement, when met with patience and consequence, is the quickest way to humility. I opened the gate slowly, letting her see me fully, not angry, not triumphant, just calm, steady, and observant. She stopped mid-sentence, blinking in confusion. For the first time, her fire faltered. My gaze, quiet yet unyielding, met hers. In that pause, I knew she felt it, that the rules of this household, this life, were no longer dictated by her arrogance. I said nothing. I did not argue. I did not threaten. Silence in this moment became the weight of authority. And she, for the first time, understood the fragility of the power she assumed she had. The morning passed slowly. She hovered near the gate, muttering, fuming, unable to act, while I moved through my day as if nothing had happened. But in that calm, deliberate presence, the first cracks appeared in her confidence. She did not yet know the depth of the consequences she had triggered, but soon the full weight would be revealed. By nightfall, the air had shifted. The house, the gate, the very rhythm of our lives were no longer hers to command. And tomorrow she would discover that words alone cannot rewrite history, that arrogance without understanding is powerless, and that respect, true respect, cannot be stolen, demanded. or shouted into existence, because some lessons are learned only in the quiet, in the waiting, and in the inevitable consequences of one's own choices. The morning after her furious outburst, the house feels different. Silence has weight now, a quiet authority that she can sense even before she steps onto the property. I move through each room slowly, letting my gaze linger on the shelves, the photographs, the furniture, all the physical reminders of decades of care, sacrifice, and deliberate action. Nothing she says or does can undo what has been built over a lifetime. She believes she has power, but she does not yet understand that true authority is invisible, patient, and unassailable. By mid-morning, she returns, this time with a mixture of rage and confusion. She stomps up the driveway, her voice carrying over the lawn, demanding that I acknowledge her, obey her, and restore her imagined dominance. But I do not move quickly. I do not shout. I remain at the porch, calm and steady, watching her storm approach. She is frantic, unaware that every step she takes, every breath she expends in anger, only confirms her lack of control. When she reaches the gate, she bangs on it and screams, accusing me of being beneath her, worthless and undeserving of respect. I do not respond immediately. Instead, I let her words echo against the wooden frame of the gate. Each insult, each accusation, becomes a mirror reflecting her own arrogance back at her. She had assumed authority was inherited, that entitlement was a shield. Now she begins to sense the fragility of those assumptions. Later that afternoon, I take a walk through the garden, allowing the sun to warm my back while she remains near the gate, pacing, shouting, trying to assert control over a house she believes she owns. Neighbors glance, some with concern, others with curiosity. She is visibly shaken by the quiet confidence I exude. I am not threatening. I am not angry. I am simply patient. And that patience carries more weight than her shouting ever could. By evening, her attempts to rally allies begin to fail. Friends she counted on to support her plans respond with gentle refusals or vague neutrality. She phones distant relatives, hoping for validation or assistance, and receives the same quiet, firm refusals. The legal arrangements I put in place, updates to the will, careful adjustments to property rights, protections she was unaware of, are immutable. Each refusal, each subtle denial, slowly erodes her sense of control. The first real crack in her arrogance comes when she tries to access funds she assumes she could command. A bank call ends abruptly with polite but unyielding information. The accounts are updated and no changes can be made without compliance from all necessary parties. The words hit her like ice water. She stands frozen, phone trembling in her hand, as comprehension begins to dawn. The reality is undeniable. Her father is not powerless, and her entitlement is meaningless against preparation and foresight. That evening, she sits on the curb outside the gate, head in her hands, her energy spent. I watch from the porch, coffee in hand, my gaze steady and calm. There is no triumph in me, only the quiet satisfaction of knowing that the lesson is beginning to take root. She cannot scream her way out of consequences. She cannot charm her way into authority she never earned. She is forced to confront, for the first time, the truth of responsibility, foresight, and the subtle but absolute power of preparation. The next morning, she approaches the gate with caution. Her voice is quieter, her posture less aggressive. She still bristles, still tries to assert control. But there is hesitation now, a recognition that her assumptions are being challenged. I open the gate slowly, meeting her gaze with calm authority. She falters. Words fail her. She had believed that yelling, demanding, and asserting dominance could reshape reality, but now she begins to sense that authority without wisdom and foresight is fragile. Days pass, and the transformation continues, subtle but undeniable. She attempts small gestures, tentative requests, and careful inquiries, only to find that the world does not bend to arrogance. Doors she assumed would open are closed. Assistance she expected is politely withheld. Every action she takes is met with quiet resistance. Not hostility, an invisible force demonstrating that entitlement is powerless without preparation and responsibility. By the end of the week, she begins to understand the first true lessons. Comfort and authority are not inherited. Entitlement is meaningless without understanding. And arrogance can only shield a person for so long before consequences arrive. She paces less, yells less, and hesitates more. The anger is still there, simmering beneath the surface, but it no longer dominates her actions. She is forced to reflect, to calculate, to consider the cost of every word, every demand, every assumption. And throughout it all, I remain calm. I do not need to shout. I do not need to punish. The structures, the arrangements, the silent preparations I enacted speak louder than any argument could. She is learning, painfully and undeniably, that the world respects foresight over fury, preparation over entitlement, and calm authority over aggression. By the weekend, she is exhausted. The realization begins to crystallize in her eyes. For the first time, she sees the truth of what she has done, the arrogance that once blinded her, the disrespect she wielded like a weapon, and the life she assumed she could command without understanding. The lesson is no longer theoretical. It is lived, experienced, and impossible to ignore. And in that quiet victory, I understand a deeper truth. The greatest lessons are not delivered in anger, but in patience. Not through punishment, but through consequence. And not by shouting at entitlement, but by letting the world, prepared and steady, respond to it. The week drags on, and she grows more restless with each passing day. She tries to assert herself, arriving at the gate at different hours, shouting demands that fall on the steady silence of my authority. Each attempt fails. Her friends, once eager to support her whims, now respond with polite refusals or excuses. She begins to understand, gradually and painfully, that the world does not bend for her. Entitlement, she is learning, has no weight where preparation, patience, and foresight hold sway. One afternoon, she arrives with documents she believes can challenge the arrangements I quietly enacted. Papers clutched in her hands, face flushed with anger, she tries to present them as proof that she can reclaim her assumed authority. I do not interrupt. I do not shout. I watch as she moves back and forth, agitation radiating from her, like heat from a fire. Then I speak, calm, deliberate, and immovable. Everything has already been settled, I say. There is nothing here for you to claim through anger or argument. Respect and responsibility are earned, not demanded. Her voice falters. She stammers, unsure how to respond. For the first time, the mask of arrogance cracks. She looks around, noticing for the first time the order, the calm, and the unshakable authority I embody simply by being steady, prepared, and patient. That night, she retreats, pacing in her car, muttering under her breath. She dials friends and relatives, hoping for someone to challenge the arrangements, to validate her assumed power, but every call ends in polite refusals, in explanations that gently yet firmly confirm her limitations. She begins to see that she has overestimated the influence of connections, charm, and entitlement. Real power, she now realizes, requires preparation and foresight. By midweek, she is visibly exhausted. Her hands shake, her hair falls across her face as she struggles to process the magnitude of what she has unleashed. Her attempts to storm the gate, demand explanations, or assert herself through anger are met with calm observation. I watch her from the porch, coffee in hand, and feel no pride. No malice, only the quiet satisfaction of knowing the lesson is unfolding exactly as it should. One evening, she approaches the gate, her movements hesitant. She is no longer the confident, shouting figure of earlier days. Her posture is slightly hunched, her eyes darting nervously. The fury is still present, simmering beneath the surface, but it is tempered by uncertainty. She tries to speak, but the words fail to land with the power she expected. I open the gate slowly, meeting her gaze with steady calm. The silence speaks louder than any argument. Hours pass. She remains near the gate, muttering, pacing, trying to calculate the path forward. Each idea, each plan she attempts, crumbles quietly, like sand slipping through her fingers. Bank accounts, legal documents, and property arrangements, all secured in ways she never anticipated, remain beyond her reach. Every attempt she makes to regain authority ends in failure, each one reinforcing the truth she has been trying to ignore. She assumed power she never earned. The transformation begins subtly at first. Her voice softens when she speaks. She hesitates before acting. She pauses mid-gesture, reconsidering consequences she previously ignored. The arrogance that defined her personality begins to ebb, replaced by a tentative awareness that she is not in control and that her assumptions have been fatally flawed. By the end of the week, she is exhausted, defeated not by confrontation, but by the quiet weight of inevitability. Her pride, once impenetrable, has cracked. She approaches the gate, this time with a different posture, hands open slightly, shoulders slumped, eyes downcast. I watch her, silent and patient, allowing the consequences to speak for themselves. She kneels, almost instinctively, placing her hands on the ground in a gesture of submission she had never known before. I was wrong," she whispers, voice trembling. "I didn't understand, please. I need your help. I beg you." For the first time, she is fully aware of the lesson. Not a fraction of it, not partially. She feels the full weight of her arrogance, her entitlement, and her failure. She understands the fragility of assumed authority and the cost of disrespecting those who quietly prepared for the moment she could not imagine. I do not respond immediately. I simply stand, meeting her gaze steadily. The silence is complete. Then, calmly, deliberately, I speak. You will be helped, not because of demands, not because of anger, not because of entitlement, but because you now understand the cost of your actions. Respect is earned, not assumed. Authority is not given, it is demonstrated. And humility is something you must carry forward. Tears stream down her face as comprehension finally settles. She had believed that shouting, commanding, and assuming control would protect her. Now she understands that patience, preparation, and foresight hold far greater power. The transformation is profound, visible not only in her posture and expressions, but in the way she breathes, the way she holds herself, and the hesitant reverence in her eyes. Over the next few days, she begins to rebuild, slowly and carefully, aware of every choice, every action, every word. She manages tasks she once dismissed, asks questions she once assumed unnecessary, and approaches responsibilities with a humility that had been absent before. Her former arrogance has been replaced with understanding, respect, and awareness of consequences. By the end of Part 3, the world has shifted entirely. She is no longer the arrogant, entitled figure who yelled at me at the gate. She is learning, truly learning, that nothing, no house, no inheritance, no favor is owed. Every step forward requires effort, every word must be measured, and every action carries consequence. The quiet, deliberate authority I have maintained for decades now resonates within her. And as I watch her slowly rise from the pavement, hands still slightly trembling, head bowed in recognition of the lessons learned, I feel the final pieces of this long, difficult chapter begin to fall into place. She will never forget what it means to assume power without understanding. She will never forget the house, the gate, or the patient, unwavering presence of the one she once called just a servant. The next morning feels different. Not quiet from tension, but quiet from understanding. I sit on the porch as the sun rises, warm light spilling across the lawn, coffee steady in my hands. I'm not waiting for an apology. I'm waiting to see if the lesson stayed. She arrives slowly, no anger this time. Her steps are careful, her shoulders lowered. When she reaches the gate, she doesn't grab it or shake it. She just stands there, hands folded, eyes unsure. That alone tells me everything. I walk down and open the gate without a word. She freezes for a second, then looks at me like she's seeing me clearly for the first time in years. Not as someone to control. Not as someone beneath her. Just her father. I was wrong, she says quietly. No excuses. No blame. Just truth. I nod. Wrong words can be forgiven. Wrong thinking takes longer to fix. What you learn after this matters more than what you said before. She steps inside, moving through the house carefully, almost respectfully. The same walls, the same rooms, but now she understands they were never symbols of entitlement. They were symbols of responsibility. Over the next days, she changes in ways that don't need announcements. She helps without being asked. She listens instead of demanding. She thinks before she speaks. The arrogance that once filled every room is gone, replaced by awareness and restraint. One evening, she sits beside me on the porch, the sky dimming into soft gold. I didn't lose everything, she says. I almost did. That's what scared me. That fear, I reply calmly, isn't punishment. It's clarity. Don't forget it. She nods, eyes fixed on the horizon. I won't. As night settles, I realize the lesson is complete. Not because she begged. Not because I withheld anything. But because consequences spoke where arguments never could. Respect isn't demanded. Authority isn't shouted. And family isn't something you downgrade without cost. At 75 years old, I've learned this much. The strongest revenge is not cruelty. It's letting someone face the truth and giving them the chance to grow from it. The gate closes behind us softly. And peace finally takes its place.